The Israel Lobby and US Foreign Policy. Is it worth a read? So before we get into the meat of the video, I want to let you guys know you can pick up the book from bookshop.org in the description down below. Bookshop.org is a company that works with local bookshops to give them a little bit more of a kickback whenever you buy books on bookshop.org. Link is going to be in the description down below. So if you've been reading about Palestine and Israel and Palestine, this book has probably come up in a suggested book for you to read. It's definitely one that came up for me, and I bought it because when I was reading up about it, it was always like, oh, this book is so, it's out there, pushes the boundaries, it's controversial, and I've realized reading it, it's not really controversial, it's just that when the book was written, these things weren't common knowledge, and perhaps this book is one of the reasons these things are common knowledge now. So, maybe it was controversial when it came out. The book originally came out in 2007, which means it came out prior to the Obama administration. So it mostly talks about the Bush administration and before that, but overall, it's usually mainly surrounding the Bush administration. So the book does an overview of what the Israel lobby is, why there is an Israel lobby, the history of it, so sort of, why these groups formed, sort of their impact on US politics overall, like sort of generally, and kind of how they work. So talking about how, they were influencing during the Cold War, why some people think they were important during the Cold War, but it also kind of goes over why these arguments for the Israel lobby, and the Israel lobby is basically what they're calling all of the lobbyist groups that are pro-Israel, because there's not just people like AIPAC, there are multiple pro-Israel lobbies, so they're basically saying the Israel lobby as an overall term for this book. But basically, it talks about, in the first half of the book, why the lobby formed, how the lobby formed, and how various different aspects of the lobby formed. So there's AIPAC, there's the Christian Zionist PACs, so it's not just one, it's kind of talking about all of them. But then it also goes like a step-by-step as to the negative impacts overall that the State of Israel and the Israel lobby has had on the US. So, for example, people are like, okay, the Cold War is one of the reasons the US and Israel's relationship was so close. However, it kind of describes why, despite that, it wasn't really in the US's interest to be so close to Israel even during the Cold War. And it also talks about the war on terror and how the Israel lobby's relationship with the US actually made it harder to resolve this war on terror and made the US even more entwined with the region in a way that didn't really benefit the United States all that much. And then the second half of the book talks about specific examples of this. It talks about how the Israel lobby lobbies the US to make it harder for Palestinians to gain independence, to make it harder for the Palestinian people to, live. Then it moves on to the Iraq war. It moves on to the relationship with Iran, the Lebanon war, the Syria war, sort of when Israel stole the Golan Heights, and how the US reacted to that, and how the entire US reaction completely was different to the rest of the world's reaction to Israel's aggression because of how closely the Israel lobby worked with US politicians. And again, in the first half of the book, it kind of talks about how the lobbying groups do this, the different PACs do this, whether it be appealing to sort of like the religious sentiment of it, basically saying to politicians, well, if you're not pro-Israel, you're going to upset a whole bunch of constituents, but if you are pro-Israel, you're not really going to upset that many people. Again, this was written in 2007, so nearly 20 years ago, so sort of the landscape has shifted a lot right now, which is kind of one of the reasons I'm a bit iffy on the book, just simply because it's a little bit outdated in that sense. It also talks about how, fundraising is used, just US politics in general, how US politics in general is very much, you can pay the candidates to basically lobby in your favor in Congress, which is, in my opinion, completely backwards. I don't understand how that can work, but to be honest, we're starting to see that happening in the UK anyway. Now, it does very, very clearly try to explain the difference between the actions of the Israel lobby and just average American Jewish people, and how, you should not be conflating the actions of these lobbying groups to just most everyday Jewish people in America, just like you shouldn't be doing that for, I don't know, a guy who's like, yeah, I've just got this handgun because, and then the NRA. They're not really, you shouldn't be conflating the two. That was my own personal example. That was an example from this book, so don't come for the book if you don't like that example. It's a bit ham-fisted. But yeah, so that's kind of what this book is about. A great thing about this book is at the end of every chapter there is a conclusion section. It's either really short or it's a few pages, which is really good because there is a lot of information in this. Like, it goes into very specific examples as well, so there's a lot to take in. So having these conclusion sections at the end of every chapter is really helpful because it kind of sums it all up, which a conclusion should do because it's the conclusion. But it is helpful because it's a lot to take in. Again, written in 2007, so it is also slightly older stuff. You know, 2007, what was I, like 10? So I didn't really get the meat of what's going on sort of when I was a kid. So it is telling me a lot of stuff I might not have known happened. So it is definitely a lot to take in, which is why those conclusions are great. The writing style is fine. It's a non-fiction book, so you know it's somewhat engaging. It's not the most, you know, it's not the most grabbing, but I think that's because it's very much trying to just give you the information. It's not trying to kind of draw you in with a story, kind of how, you know, you lay out a non-fiction book, you tell a narrative. It is basically just trying to be like, this is the things that Israel lobbies do and how they affect the US. There is a little bit of editorialization, I won't lie, you know, kind of, they do give their opinions at certain aspects, kind of like when they're saying, well, Israel's involvement involving the US during the Iraq War, not really to the benefit of the US, and, you know, Israel, them saying, there were allegations that Sharon kind of was like, oh, we messed up getting the US involved so heavily with Iraq, but the editorialization as well, we didn't really hear anything about that, so that's probably wrong. So those kind of things, that the editorialization in this book, I still recommend it. It's definitely it's an interesting read. Again, I think it's simply, when it came out, it was, wow, what's going on? Controversy. Never heard this stuff before, or at least it's not so widely spoken about. But in 2024, we do really know these things, and this book might be one of the reasons we know these things. So, you know, maybe that's why it's worth a read. It's probably going to be a little bit expensive. I believe it's like one of those books which you're not going to find for less than £15 or $15 unless you buy it secondhand. I'm pretty sure I bought my copy secondhand. I'm going to put the link in the description if it's available. But, you know, if you can, try and find it secondhand, or try and find it from an independent bookseller, or try and find it from your library. It's definitely worth a read at the very least. Just, I was expecting to be blown away from all the stuff I'd read about the book, but now having read it, I understand I wasn't blown away because this book may be the reason I already know a lot of the stuff it talks about. Simply just, I didn't know this book was probably the reason I already knew about the stuff the book is talking about. If that makes sense. I think it's good to have on your shelf anyway. It's good to be able to flip through and refer to specific examples of how the Israel lobby has impacted US foreign policy and even US domestic policy. So that's probably going to be a reason to pick it up, especially if, you know, you want to refer back to it, you want to give examples, you want to give quotes and stuff. That's, I think, going to be the biggest benefit of this, especially if maybe you're, you know, interested in doing something academic in relation to it. So that's been my review of the Israel lobby. Again, you can get the book in the description down below, which links to bookshop.org. If not, I'll put the ISBN for the book for you to go and find it. Let me know if you've read the book, and or if you haven't, will you pick it up, and what your thoughts are on it if you have read it. I'd love to know in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, share the video with a friend or family member, and I hope you read a great book today.